Howdy guys, Mr. Bob here, Bob Langston from the North Carolina Zoo, and I am your neighborhood naturalist. Appreciate you letting me come and join you a little while today. It's kind of a windy and cool day here in January, so we're going to take a look at how some of the wild animals that live real close by keep from getting too cold in the wintertime. Now the first thing is this, we're going to talk primarily today about birds. And coming up in about a month, we're going to do a winter bird count. More on that in a little bit, but it's called the Great Backyard Bird Count. And we're going to look at the birds that are here in the winter. Now some will live here year-round, like cardinals. Some are only going to be wintertime residents, and when the weather starts to warm up, they head up towards Canada. So, how does a bird stay warm? First thing, number one, birds and humans have one characteristic in common, thing we share, and we are called endotherms. That means we're warm-blooded and we have an internal mechanism for regulating our own temperature. Now, ectotherms, or cold-blooded animals, do not. So when it gets cold, ectotherms generally handle things by just cooling down. They get really slow and sluggish, and their heart rate slows way down, their metabolism gets slow, and they enter a state called torpor, or they become torpid. Birds don't do that. Birds are active all the time. Birds have a very, very high metabolism. They have to eat a lot. But birds do something that not a lot of animals do. They fly. So one of the disadvantages of certain animals is that, for example, a polar bear might eat a lot, and that way they can store energy, and it keeps them warm in the wintertime. Birds can't do that. Their metabolism is much too fast, and if they stored energy, storing energy is gaining weight. Yes, that's right. I suppose you could say that since we started this Neighborhood Naturalist series, Mr. Bob has been storing energy steadily. I call it the Quarantine 40. I'd love to tell you I'm puffed up with air, but I'm actually just fat. Which is interesting because those are the actual two best natural insulators. Air and fat. I'll get to the air in a minute. Let's talk about fat for a second. When we eat a lot of food, especially high-calorie content, we store that energy as fat. It does a couple of things. Number one, it's energy. It's readily available energy, so that if we had to go for a long period of time without eating, we would be carrying it with us, and we would slowly consume that energy as a way to keep going and to stay warm. Number one. Number two, it provides insulation. Now, insulation means that it keeps our inside core temperature. Fingers might get cold, skin might get cold, but our heart, lungs, and all the stuff inside, our guts if you wish, they stay nice and warm like they're supposed to. So that's a real plus. There's a problem. You see, fat helps certain animals. For example, polar bears. It does a couple of things for them. Number one, it's insulation. Number two, it's food. But also, number three, it floats. Fat actually has that problem. It does float. Now, it's a great thing if you're a polar bear because that gives you a little extra buoyancy and you don't have to work so hard to swim. This is actually just a chunk of butter sitting here in this jug of water, but it is floating, and that tells you that fat is less dense than water. But it does have weight. Now, a gallon of water weighs about 8 pounds, and a gallon of fat is probably about 6.5 to 7 pounds. So it has weight. Birds can't carry a lot of extra weight because they have to fly. Birds are constantly eating. Birds are constantly pooping. They have that high metabolism, so they can take something from the time they eat it to the time they pass it out really fast. That's why feeders like this are real beneficial, is the seeds that go in there have a high fat content. So how do birds keep from getting too cold? Birds have something that no other animal does, and they have feathers. Feathers can do a lot of cool things. These come from a turkey vulture. I'm looking over that way because there was one circling just a few minutes ago. But feathers can be used to fly. They can also be used to help identify individual birds. This one I happen to have in my pocket is this beautiful blue color here. And this one, some of you may recognize it, actually comes from a blue jay. This is one of the wing or tail feathers, and this is one of their color characteristics. So feathers let other birds know, hey, I'm the same kind of bird you are. We're cool. We're birds of a feather. Go ahead. Come on. Anyway, so that's one of the things they do for them. But they're very light. So if birds can't carry in a lot of extra weight, they can use feathers to keep them warm. Now, as a fully mature bird, they're going to have feathers like this. These are primary flight feathers that are found on the wings of a turkey vulture. But when it gets really, really cold, you look at it and go, look at that bird. He looks really fat. Well, he's not fat. He's just got his feathers fluffed up. Why? Because by fluffing up his feathers, he's trapped air between his feathers and his skin. It's a way to stay warm. Now, one of the interesting things about feathers, we actually believe, some of us anyway, that certain dinosaurs had feathers. Dinosaurs were probably very different from other reptiles. Alligators are reptiles, and they're cold-blooded, they're ectotherms, and they're ambush hunters. So they just sort of sit there and wait until it's a real close opportunity. They make a lunge and try and grab whatever they're going to eat. Many dinosaurs, especially the carnivores, were hunters. They were chasers. They had to run. They had a high metabolism. They had to eat a lot. So they probably didn't have the ability to get torpid in the wintertime. So some of us believe that dinosaurs may have been warm-blooded, endotherms. And if that's the case, so we believe that some of them may have had feathers. And the benefit of the feathers was really for insulation, because if you have to run to catch your food and you have to carry extra insulation, if you're carrying fat, it's going to weigh something. If you're carrying feathers, it weighs a lot less. So in order to stay really, really warm, especially when they're young, and especially in their undercoats, many birds have feathers that are kind of fluffy. You see, now we're talking about air. See, fat is one sort of insulation that helps these guys stay warm. Air is another. But air, you can't really hold it. If we were going to do it, we'd have to have it in a balloon or something like that. But in a lot of cases, birds can't do that. So birds have feathers that take up space. And here you see this fluffy stuff at the base of this feather, and it's nice and soft, and it's real fluffy, and what that does is it takes up space. And as long as it takes up space, it can trap air. And when it traps air, the air can be warmed by your body, and that actually keeps you from getting too cold. Here's an example how we learned it from birds. The vest I'm wearing right now is insulated with goose down. That fluffy, feathery stuff is inside here. Now, feathers are attached to the bird, so they can actually trap that air right next to the skin. I can't do that, so I have to have something to hold it together, so I have this nylon vest here, and it's filled with goose down. It's kind of creepy, though, because whenever I'm around the zoo and I get around the Canada geese, they look at me like, "Hey, Bob, what's in the vest?" I kind of get the feeling they're a little bit concerned that I might have eyes on them for my next piece of clothing. Who knows? But anyway, as long as this stuff stays inside here and it can trap some air, it's kind of balloony. We call them puffer jackets from time to time. It's kind of balloony, but it traps air inside here, keeps me warm. Downside. The puns just keep coming today. The downside of this is that the down feathers, when they're not attached to a living bird, when they get wet, they tend to clump up and they crush down and they don't hold air. So down as an insulator for people clothing has that limitation. You have to have some kind of a barrier to try and keep it from getting wet and to keep it from crushing and losing its ability to insulate. So, insulation. You can have fat, which can float. That can get under your skin, but it is heavy. Or you can use feathers to trap air, and that's another way that you can keep yourself warm. Insulation. It's a nifty trick. So in the wintertime, when we start censusing the birds and taking a look at them to see who's here, a lot of times, if it's a really cold, windy day, right here on one of my trees, these are arborvitae trees, I might see a little small bird, and he's sitting there, and it looks really fat. He's just got his feathers fluffed up, so he can trap some air next to his skin, between his skin and his feathers, and helps keep him warm. Air and feathers work together as insulation, but they have to have that high metabolism from the seeds and everything to do it. Cool? You got it? Sweet. All right. A couple of things real quick. Again, backyard bird count's going to happen right around Valentine's Day in the middle of February. I'll tell you more about that next time. In the meantime, the North Carolina Zoo is open. We are still observing all of our COVID-19 protocols, meaning that you do have to make reservations, you do have to buy your tickets in advance and get a reserve time to come in. You can do that by visiting our website at www.nczoo.org. It's really easy to do, and when you get in, you can have the receipt on your cell phone, show it, check in, and you're good to go. Peyton is a brand new polar bear. He just hit the exhibit today. He came to us, and if you want to know a little bit more about him, he was actually born in Chicago, here's the tricky thing. He's named after Walter Payton. And, okay, kids, you can ask your dad who that is. Or older family members, anyway. But Walter Payton was a football player, played for the Chicago Bears many years ago. Anyhow, Chicago Bear, he came from Chicago. Hey, I'm beginning to see something here. www.nczoo.org. Find out everything you need to do to plan your visit to the zoo. On a day like today when it's cool, the animals are out, they're having a good time. You can have a great time as well. So please do that. Come and see us. But in the meantime, please take the opportunity to get outside, study a little nature, and take care of yourselves and be safe. I am Mr. Bob for the North Carolina Zoo, your neighborhood naturalist, Bob Langston. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.